Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're putting Vladimir Putin under the microscope. We're going to map out his entire trajectory, starting from a really poverty-stricken childhood, running through his shadowy days in the KGB, all the way to the roots of his current geopolitical moves. And look, there's no taking sides here. We are just looking at the raw facts and historical data to help us really understand how this man operates.
Right now, with conflicts like the one in Ukraine absolutely dominating our feeds, we really have to stop and ask a foundational question. How did a boy with such incredibly humble beginnings manage to consolidate absolute power on the world stage? Well, as you'll see, the answer is hidden in a series of very intense, formative experiences. Section 1. The Boy from Leningrad.
Okay, so our timeline actually kicks off in post-World War II Leningrad, which we now know as St. Petersburg. The city had just been devastated by this brutal 872 days siege, and starvation was literally everywhere. Born in 1952 into severe poverty, Putin's family shared this dilapidated apartment where, believe it or not, he spent his free time chasing rats out of the stairwell. Having already lost two brothers to illness and wartime starvation, young Putin realized pretty quickly that he had to project absolute strength just to survive. This harsh environment is exactly what drove him to master judo, pushing himself to become formidable against all odds.
Tracing his early ambitions, you can really see how this need for strength evolved. Deeply inspired by Soviet spy movies, a highly ambitious ninth-grade Putin literally walked right into a KGB office and asked for a job. They told him he needed a law degree first, and he didn't even blink. He went out, earned that degree from Leningrad State University, and officially entered the intelligence agency at age 23. It was a childhood dream realized.
Section 2. The Spy's Disillusionment.
Now, what's fascinating here is that achieving his dream job ultimately led to a defining ideological trauma. Deployed as an intelligence officer to Dresden in East Germany, Putin was suddenly thrust into the collapse of the Soviet bloc. When the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, an angry mob targeted his KGB office. But instead of fleeing, Putin stepped outside and delivered an incredibly bold bluff. He told them, if anyone steps forward, the guards will fire. And you know what? The sheer confidence worked. The crowd retreated without a single shot being fired. But we have to look at the stark reality behind that moment. Behind that confident bluff, Putin was desperately calling for military backup. He expected immediate support. But instead, he was told they couldn't act without orders from Moscow, and Moscow was completely silent. This refusal to send backup was a profound betrayal for him. It instilled a lifelong disgust for what he viewed as the weak, ineffective central leadership of Mikhail Gorbachev.
Section 3. Climbing the political ladder. Returning to a rapidly collapsing Soviet Union in 1990, Putin pivoted straight into local politics. And just look at how rapidly he climbed the ranks. Leveraging a clean administrative record under the mayor of St. Petersburg, he moved to Moscow. There, he earned the trust of an ailing Boris Yeltsin and quickly jumped from deputy chief of the presidential staff to prime minister to acting president in just a few short years. He effectively positioned himself as this indispensable, highly disciplined operator in an otherwise chaotic government.
Section 4. Forged in the Chechen War. The crucial moment that transformed him from a background bureaucrat into a national hero was actually his ruthless response to a massive domestic crisis. In August 1999, horrific apartment bombings across cities like Moscow killed over 300 civilians. A terrified, furious Russian public then demanded decisive action against the Chechen militants who were blamed for the attacks. Basically, they were looking for a savior. Given full control of the situation by Yeltsin, Putin ordered a massive, completely uncompromising military assault. The Second Chechen War resulted in over 80,000 deaths. It left entire cities in absolute ruin. And yet, it was exactly this aggressive, unyielding force that cemented his image among the Russian public as their ultimate strongman protector. Section 5. Consolidating absolute power. Following Yeltsin's abrupt resignation, Putin decisively won the March 2000 election, kicking off a massive top-down transformation of the state. And the economics here are absolutely key. Rising global oil demand directly fueled Russia's surging economic growth and household incomes. Under Putin, widespread poverty plummeted. The Russian people credited him for their new economic stability, and that drove his approval rating to a soaring 71% for his 2004 re-election. But then he hit a snag. The Russian constitution limited presidents to 2 consecutive terms. So what was his solution? A highly calculated legal maneuver. In 2008, he temporarily swapped roles with his trusted ally Dmitry Medvedev. Medvedev became president, Putin became prime minister, but come on, it was an open secret who was actually pulling the strings. They even used this little window to extend future presidential terms from 4 years to 6, perfectly setting the stage for Putin's prolonged return to the top job.
Now, during all this consolidation, his zero tolerance for opposition became objectively clear. Challengers from every spectrum met incredibly grim fates. Mikhail Khodorkovsky, the richest man in Russia who tried to rebel, was jailed in 2003. Anna Politkovskaya, a journalist exposing human rights abuses, was assassinated in 2006. And more recently, Yevgeny Prigozhin, the mercenary leader who led a brief mutiny, died in a fatal plane crash in 2023. The historical sources consistently show us that challenging the state under Putin's rule has resulted in prison, assassination, or highly suspicious accidents.
Section 6. An unyielding foreign policy. So how do these historical traumas and this total domestic consolidation connect to his international stance today? Well, since the USSR's collapse, Western influence has expanded, and driven by an obsession with state security, which, remember, is rooted all the way back in that vulnerability he felt in Dresden, Putin's leadership is completely defined by aggressive actions to secure his borders. Tracing this out, we see military interventions in Georgia in 2008, the annexation of Crimea in 2014, and of course, it all culminates in the devastating, ongoing conflict in Ukraine. When you step back and look at the complete picture of his life, we are really left with a critical question. How will a worldview forged by severe childhood poverty, bitter political betrayal in a crumbling empire, and relentless warfare ultimately shape the future of global geopolitics? It's a complex, high-stakes reality we all have to navigate. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this deep dive into the historical data gave you a much clearer perspective on the man behind the headlines.